Well, I've got 7 o'clock by my watch. I will call the meeting to order. Approve the agenda.
Getting everybody. Because there's one person came.
Second.
I'm going to call on Brenda Dreyer to
You're on,
give
Brenda.
us a little insight on this.
Good evening, planning and zoning board members and interested members of the public. My understanding is that you've had a number of requests from landowners in northern Mitchell County to rezone their property to industrial. And a little background on some of the things going on regarding site selection for projects and initiatives by the state of Iowa. Over the years, companies would take a number of years to select a site, do analysis on the site, and come to a decision over time. In the field of industrial development, we're finding that the time frame, in order to be competitive, companies are expecting more work to be done on sites as they're considering them. And the term shovel-ready is tossed out there, and one of the key things to that is that zoning has been taken a look at, that it's zoned appropriately, that there's been some work done to analyze specific things related to the site. And with this phenomena happening, that's the trend in economic development, the state of Iowa has went out to the economic developers and said, we are going to put a real preference on the leads we get as a state to look at sites that have been site certified. And so that caused the Mitchell County Economic Development Board, other volunteers that work in economic development, to say, where are the likely spots where we can position competitive sites to go through the certification process, and hopefully with the plan of attracting industry to Mitchell County. And the fact of the matter is, we have 2 Class 1 rails coming together on the north end of the county. There are very few places out there where 2 Class 1s come together that close, where actually some development can occur. A lot of times railroads come together in downtown metro areas, but there's no opportunities for projects to happen. And so as we've analyzed Mitchell County and looked at potential sites, a lot of our attention has been focused in the area around where the Canadian Pacific and the Canadian National come together. Now that's not the only area that we've been focused on. We also have an area focused south of Osage, and I think you'll ultimately see us focus potentially maybe on a site as well in eastern Mitchell County. But we're continuing to try to analyze where is really kind of the best situation south of Osage in terms of assets in addition to rail that makes sense to go through the certification process, and what would we ultimately attract to a site on the east side of the county. So this is the first discussion. I anticipate that in 6 weeks we'll be back with a potential tract south of Osage that we've identified that we would like to start through the site certification process. Again, the landowners have to be the ones that request rezoning, and so we need to continue to work with the land that we've initially identified south of Osage, but we have a number of landowners that are on the north end that have indicated that potentially they understand the assets that we have between the 2 rails and would like to start the process of allowing us to certify their sites for industrial development. So it's a part of the site certification process, and I know we've met before when I actually have a project here, and it's in your hands to go up or down in terms of whether or not the project's going to go or not if we get the rezoning changed. And so I think that's why it's a part of site certification. They want it zoned correctly and ready for industry, so that a project isn't sitting here having to, get an up or down vote when they've decided whether or not. So we're trying to get our ducks in a row, and again, zoning is perhaps maybe one of the first pieces. Willingness for the landowners to work with us, that's occurred. They're the ones who submitted the letters. But I just happened, as I was sitting here waiting for the meeting to start, just started to go through a magazine that came today on site selection, and I'm only halfway through it, and all of these tabs talk about sites that are certified and shovel ready for things to come. That's our competition if we want to continue to grow our county. I think we need to identify sites. We need to be a partner with the state of Iowa. Again, without getting through the certification process, they're not going to be shooting leads our direction. There are a number of instances, if the Director of Economic Development was here, she'd tell you that they thought they had everything in order. Our leads are so valuable to the state of Iowa, and we've had deals fall apart because all of the pieces weren't necessarily put together to make a project happen. And there are very much significant discussions that fell on the board, whether it be a zoning board or a permitting or a not getting, saying they were ready and their water studies weren't done. So we're trying to get all those pieces in place. And we would try to be targeting July in terms of being able to get all these other things together to get a site certified. So any questions from me about that?
What are the other steps to making a site certified?
And can the public ask me questions, Mark? Or?
Sure.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I wasn't breaking any rules. There would be, we need to look at what is the electrical infrastructure in place, what is our gas ability to deliver, and what levels could we deliver gas. We would look at, what would we have for potential water supplies. We would look at the transportation structures, and let's say if we need to be able to prove to them through the site selection process that we would be able to pave a road to accommodate potential projects. So it actually occurs in 3 different phases, and the first phase is to say, do you have the land under control? What's the size of the land? Is it zoned industrial? What is the current capabilities for electric? What can the capabilities be for electric? And write down the list of what would be considered key infrastructures. And then that would be the inventory to be able to say, okay, what sort of project can you attract to that area based on what the capabilities are for electric, natural gas, water, that sort of thing. So, but again, without having it zoned for a business purpose, that's really one of the first phases.
Can you speak a little bit, would there be differences in light industry versus heavy industry?
And I would divert that to Mark. I don't know the specifics, Deb, on that.
Yeah, there's different classifications, and heavy industrial is obviously the most broadest.
Like the ethanol plant, is that heavy industry?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Light industrial would be more like, I'm trying to think of an area that's in more of the light industrial, but it's something that's not so factory oriented. It's more light.
In typical, not speaking to specific the county, but part of again, back to the attractiveness, this wasn't a random selection. It really comes down to those 2 Class 1 railroads. And the thing that would be interesting, bigger industry is going to be interested in delivering their product by rail. And so that's why I don't I don't think from a certification process that they'd say, that would seem as an inconsistent zoning to the fact that you want to be able to promote a site that is served with 2 Class 1s.
Isn't the Canadian National a dead end at Glenville and then down south, what's up with UP?
You know, there is lots of interest in rail and rail connections, and
I mean, they just run that stretch from there to there, don't they?
it's considered a Class 1 rail, and
So they have to switch haulers when they go to.
so I know that that's an attractive, because there are very, very few places where there is in Iowa 2 Class 1s that come together.
Yes, in the further certification process, you didn't mention at any point public input or what the neighbors think. Is this evening the only opportunity neighbors have to weigh in on what they think?
Again, there will be, when a project were to come, they would still be need to, depending on what the industry is, what they might need for permits, and a lot of those permits then would trigger a public hearing. So at this point in time, we're certifying sites without a prospect. This is really for the purpose of site certification, and really this is a public hearing as it relates to the zoning of that property. But if there were a project, I'm sure that it would trigger some sort of public hearing depending on what permits they might be filing with either the state or federal or the local.
So who would that hearing be with if it's already zoned? So if we've already handled the zoning and it's all been certified, then you can bring anybody in, and this is kind of our last shot to have input to that, it seems like.
Well, and again, depending on what the industry is and what they might require for permits, if they,
So let's say it's a fertilizer plant.
Okay.
What's required for that?
you know, one of the things would be an air permit, and that would trigger a public hearing.
With
I'm sure
the
there would be.
supervisors or?
Again, I couldn't exactly tell you, but I do know that there are air permits that get issued for fertilizer plants.
Wouldn't fertilizer also need a chemical ASVAB
And again,
Water.
holding?
yeah, and again, we're not here to talk about rezoning for a fertilizer plant, so.
We're here to talk about heavy industry, and fertilizer plant would certainly fall in that category.
It would
There's
fall
no
in that
question.
category.
I mean, it would be that kind of thing.
Yep, and it would be industry that utilizes rail.
And
That is what,
And water and all the
Yep.
stuff that
it would be a industry that would probably
it's
need
kind
a
of a blank
large
check.
amount,
is what it
large
is.
amount of space that would specifically be utilizing the rail. That's what we'd be marketing it as a dual rail Class 1 site.
And so when you say we're not specifically talking about a chemical or a fertilizer plant, all of the press reports of a potential fertilizer plant coming to Mitchell County, that those are erroneous reports?
No,
or-
and I have, that's one prospect we have, and we have other prospects as well.
and
Other heavy industry prospects, Brenda?
We always have large projects, and in today's environment, there are a lot of companies that really desire rail.
And
Yeah, so.
one of the issues that came up 10 years ago was whether this would be a good site for a coal plant. Is coal still an option in your mind?
Nobody has talked to me about a coal-fired power plant, so that is not anything that I have had any discussions with in my tenure at this organization, so.
If fertilizer was an option, don't they need an environmental study for in case of runoff or containment or accident, spillage?
Yeah, and again, you know, we're not talking about a specific
Right.
company, and
But that would go with any heavy industry. There would be an environmental impact or something would have to be done with it.
I would assume that there would be some permits that they would need for the Department of Natural Resources, and there are hearings and things that are related to that.
Is the goal of economic development in Mitchell County to make jobs and economic development in Mitchell County?
That is correct.
Because the site
Well-
that we're talking about
Mhm.
is located immediately contiguous to the state line, and so the chances of employment primarily being, of jobs primarily being held by people who reside in Mitchell County in my view, are low. Lyle is closer than any town in Mitchell County. I mean, there are a lot more people, or there are at least as many people who live in Minnesota who would be attracted to a job that sits right on the state line as who live in Iowa.
And there's a lot of people that
But all
live
the
in
environmental
and live
degradation-
in Mitchell County that drive over the border to work as well. So, we at least, like I said, and that's we are focused on attraction not only of jobs but capital investment, things that diversify our tax base, and but yep, that's that's one of the things I'm focused on doing is attraction of investment in new jobs. And we can't control where people live.
When you talk about commuting, I drive to Austin to work, and I chose to live where I live because it's in the country. I have one stop sign on the way to work, come from the cities, and the beauty of Mitchell County was the fact that at some point in time, I do live right on the highway, so there's noise going by and stuff, but when it's quiet, it's no longer quiet. I mean, to me, when you talk about building there, anything really, you're taking away your opportunity for the benefit that Mitchell County has to offer people.
And so I'm here to convey that that if we want to continue to be in a way where we can continue to try to attract, I'm here to speak that rezoning is important, and we've identified a real unique opportunity in Mitchell County between the two Class 1 rail lines as an opportunity and a uniqueness that we would have available to go out and attract capital investment and jobs that may or may not live here, but they're going to be coming into the county too. And like I said, I would also say to you that we are working to identify at least one other area where we could attract capital investment, but we're only going to have the one rail option. But for a really big, heavy rail user, the ability to negotiate rail rates with the two Class 1s is a very unique competitive advantage we have. So I don't know that I would have anything beyond that really related to why I think we want to go through and request rezoning. So,
Could I just ask, how many students did the ethanol plant bring to the Sinansfer schools?
and I don't have that analysis, nor would that be
That was one of the pushes for the ethanol plant at the time,
Yeah.
was increasing the school.
Yeah. I'm here to just talk about site certification and why rezoning would be important to that. So
Is all the land that is shaded on the pieces you sent out to us?
I didn't send anything out.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Is all that land what is going to be rezoned?
That is all the proposed rezoning.
And that was a request by the landowners. That's
Yes,
the
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 yellow-
landowners
yellow
have to
areas.
sign out off on it?
Everything in yellow was
But
signed
most of
off
those
by
are
all
owned
the
by dairy
landowners.
Not all of it. Because I have land that's shaded in yellow.
You do? It shouldn't be. Somebody just a little tiny junk, or you don't need highlighted.
Yeah.
Chance to say something around here when I get done.
Okay.
I got something.
Okay.
It does seem like, Brenda, the relevance of,
Kind of.
were the promises that were made when the ethanol plant was put in, did they come true? There is some,
Very relevant.
there's some value in understanding that, because,
No, that's.
I mean,
not
you're
right.
doing a
Everything
job
else
of
in
trying
yellow
to do
is-
economic
What-
development, but we
what I had
live here
for-
because it's country.
What I had for an obligation on what Absolute said they were going to do was they have created the employment opportunities that they said to the state of Iowa and to the Mitchell County Board of Supervisors. They have more than exceeded that obligation. They said they were going to invest a certain amount of money, and they have exceeded that. And so those two particular aspects by which we got state incentives to support that project and local incentives, those two things have been met and exceeded, and like I said, so those are the only two promises that went down and became part of our agreements. And the jobs have been exceeded, and so have the capital investments. So those are the only two things that I feel like I can talk about, because those are the promises that got made on paper that I know were met, and we could provide that to you in terms of exact capital investment and numbers of jobs created. So,
Okay, thanks,
hey,
Brenda.
you bet.
Thank you, Brenda.
Yep.
Anybody else from the public that wants to?
I got a couple of questions doing stuff, and I belong to the Iowa Archaeological Society. And I do know that that area to the north that you're talking about is real rich archaeological, prehistoric archaeological area. And there is law in the state of Iowa saying that you can't disturb any mounds. You're probably all familiar with that and everything. I would request that that site and any of the other sites that you might be looking at, that you would check with the Iowa Archaeological Department down in Iowa City at the University of Iowa. And I belong to the society, but anyway, there are some people down there that I have talked to a little bit about this, and they suggest that you call them and talk to them, especially John Dorshuk, that's a state archaeologist. We really don't know. We do know that in Section 15 there are 5 archaeology sites where they will not give me the information. They will give landowners information and that on that, but it's not to the public for everybody to be flocking in there. So I think it'd be of your interest on all these sites to check that out with them and find out exactly what the situation is in those areas.
It'd be beneficial for all, because we don't want to get in there and start
Yes,
working on a site
right,
and hit it.
yeah.
And,
So that's my main concern.
You got a number for John?
Excuse
Do
me?
you have a number for John?
Yes, I do. It's 319-384-0732. And that'll get you to the office. If that doesn't work, well, then you can always call. There is a Michael Perry, he's the educational director, and he's the one that I usually work directly with, or Mitchell County Archaeology.
When they would they have to do an environmental study on anything that went in there?
I'm sorry, thank you.
That's a good question. That would be determined by them. And in most cases, they're like any other department, they lack funds. They would like to, but they're not always available to. I mean, they can't always do it. We had a situation down where I lived here a few years ago with the sand pit, but there was a couple archaeological sites there. And there were no mounds on there. And they would have liked to done it, but they did ask Mitchell County if they'd pay for it. Well, you know, that's not going to work. But I guess not too far from this area that you guys are talking about on this northern site, I do know that there are numerous mound groups. And I just think that this would all be checked out before you rezone it and see what the state archaeological department has to say. Prehistoric Indian mounds. Okay. That's a good question. If you don't know, understand what I'm talking about.
I might as well ask, right?
But anyway,
Well, I was just curious, because usually if there's any state monies or grants involved, usually you have to have an environmental study,
Yes.
no matter what, or the company
Well,
has to normally.
and maybe that's part of it, I don't know. But if you're gonna rezone something and there's a mound group in it, and that mound group could potentially be jeopardized by an industrial unit coming in there or doing any groundwork in there, the state archaeologist would certainly like to know that. Any contractor knows that, and you surely know that, if you would be digging or something someplace and come across something that pertains to Iowa archaeology or prehistoric life, that you are supposed, by law, required to contact Iowa Archaeological
I guess
Department.
what I was getting at, though, I just, if it was zoned that, I don't think anybody could just go in there without getting a study and start moving dirt around. If I'm thinking that.
That's correct. But, yeah, you're correct on that. What I'm gonna say, that I guess my point is, if there is something physically on there, or a designated site that they know that that has something to do with prehistory, like a mound group or something, they may have certain qualifications for rezoning and maybe putting a buffer strip around it or something, I don't know. And that's what I'd like to have you talk to John Dorshak, Iowa archaeologist, if you would please.
There is considerable prehistory in section 22.
Yes, I know.
Which is the section I live in.
Right.
But I think, according to the map that I have, a sampling survey of prehistoric cultural resource in Mitchell County by Ben of Luther College. This was from '79. Their work did not extend into section 15, according to this map. And so it's highly unlikely that prehistoric cultures stopped at the section line.
Yes, and that's true, but it's not only the college, Luther College coming in there and saying, okay, there's a site here. You know, it's up to those 5 sites in this section 15 were placed there, maybe not by archaeologists or Luther College, but some landowner or somebody in there, someone like me with interest in that area that knows the area. And they are probably the one that anybody can record a site.
Right.
And I have no idea what they recorded. You can fill out a site form and send it to the University of Iowa Office of Archaeology. They have that site form available to them in case future references they ever want to go up there and see what that site actually is. Now, if somebody would write on that site form that they have noticed mounds there, well, that is something that I'm sure that eventually, I mean, there's hundreds of sites in Iowa, so that's what I'm saying. It could be, whether it's the northern unit or the southern unit or the eastern unit, what we're talking about, that is something that I think should be addressed. Okay? Thanks, guys.
Really appreciate this opportunity for public input. I think it's a very important decision you're all faced with, obviously. And I understand the economic development's process and the importance of what they're trying to do, and I really respect that, and I think it's a good planning. My name is Milt Owen. I live a half mile basically on the southwestmost corner, and I own an old farmstead on the southeast corner along Echo Avenue. So I have obviously some ties to the area, as many people do here. But I guess what I'd like to do is step back from that just a little bit. I've made some notes here. I guess I'll just basically read from them to enter them into the record, and I'll give you a copy. I just thought about this quite a bit over the last few days, and I just, with respect, I would encourage the commissioners to proceed with great caution before approving this zoning change request. The area in question is between 850 and 900 acres and represents the largest ever considered for heavy industry in Mitchell County. This would be the largest zone that's ever been considered. If this area is required for specific industry, i.e. the fertilizer plant, I can understand. However, that would suggest that there's a site plan and specific needs have been discussed with the government leaders. If so, the public should have access to such plans before being asked to comment on rezoning. So if there's some need out there that we know we have to have 850 to 900 acres, I think it only is fair to the public to be able to see that, some kind of a site plan, if that's in fact in place. Otherwise, my question is, why do we need such a large area to start out with? There's probably justification for it, I just don't see it myself. If we're not rezoning for specific industry, it seems unwise to rezone such a large area. Our current heavy industry zoning states there may be any use, excluding residential use and mobile homes. So once it's rezoned, folks, it's wide open. It's out of you folks' hands, it's out of our hands basically. Yes, I realize there can be some other public hearings, but once it's rezoned, you folks and the Board of Supervisors are saying this is a site we have selected that is appropriate for heavy industry. So meet whatever other criteria you may need to meet, but that's the first ball that starts the process rolling. Once it's zoned heavy industry, anything can be built given the approval of the Mitchell County Board of Supervisors. I understand the need to plan and have space available for expansion, just as Brenda talked about. But I feel our current zoning ordinance needs to be reviewed and updated in comparison to other counties with large industrial districts before proceeding. I've had the opportunity to go look at some other much more industrialized counties than what Mitchell County is. We don't have the experience, I don't think, with heavy industry that a lot of other counties do. You look at their heavy industry zone, it's well spelled out. Conditions, setbacks, buffers. They're a well-developed, in my opinion, looking at it, they may not work as well as they appear to, but when you look at other Polk County, Blackhawk County, Dubuque County, some of the other counties around that have large industrial zones for development that they have said these are the areas that are appropriate for zoning, they have a much more detailed, much more spelled out zoning ordinance with criteria that flows through that system without just saying this is it and anything goes. Also, before proceeding, I would encourage commissioners to gather a lot more information about soils, wildlife habitat, and the geological features of the general area. There are 7 documented sinkholes on that site. Now, these aren't sinkholes that you're going to walk out and you're going to fall in them. These are what the soil district refers to as incipient sinkholes. They're simply shallow depressions where there's no natural outlet to them. So they collect water for a period of time. They may not collect more than a foot, they may not collect more than 6 inches. But there's no natural outlet until water overflows them and flows somewhere. So something is going on underground at those locations. Will they ever open up? Don't know. Did the folks with the Corvette Museum ever think that that sinkhole would open up? I mean, nobody ever dreamed of it. I got a guy was buried alive in Florida. Now, we don't have quite the same conditions, and I don't mean to use that as a scare tactic, but I just think there are things out here across the landscape that we may not be aware of, and with the karst topography and the known sinkholes, we need to learn more about it. In the Mitchell County Soil Survey, over 600 acres are classified as very limited for ponds. Very limited means soil limitations generally cannot be overcome without major soil reclamation, special design, expense, installation features with poor performance, and high maintenance required. So what that's saying is that yes, you can create ponds, but there's going to have to be a lot of special design work done that comes along with perhaps high maintenance on those areas. Lots of heavy industry need holding ponds, whether it be the fertilizer plant or somebody else that comes along. It's very likely that any type of heavy industry that might come are going to need probably some kind of holding ponds for whatever processes they might do. There's over 500 of soils. Very limited for commercial building foundations. Again, some of those things can be overcome. But my biggest concern is most of that site is karst topography. And I think all of you are well aware of karst topography, and that relates back to the sinkholes. On the opposite side, there are 80 acres of hydric soils, potential wetlands. I don't know if we know. I can't get that data. There could be some designated wetlands on the site. They could be farmed wetlands and so forth, but I think it's information that the commissioners should have as you go into making these decisions. There are known archaeological sites, as Dean brought up. There's probably 100 acres of fair to good wildlife habitat. As these areas are converted, there's no provisions of any kind for mitigation. So once these sites are gone, they're gone with our current zoning. I guess I just encourage you to gather more information and proceed with caution. And my second objective is, I guess if you do proceed, I would like to see you give some consideration to the landowners, the homes that are immediately adjacent to the proposed lines that you have here. I think there's probably at least 6 homes that are almost right adjacent to the property, plus homes in Mona. And I guess I'll speak for myself, but I think this, depending on what other people want, but I own the small acreage located at 4905 Echo. That's on the southeast corner. Parcel is an abandoned farmstead with an existing barn, pole shed, and 2 small buildings and an old house. We purchased the property with intent of tearing down the house, someday building a new spec home, and renting or selling in the future. We're in the process of removing the house, but I probably won't be building anything in the immediate future because the housing market has pretty well declined here in the last few years, and I'm not that big a speculator. However, we need to protect our investment and keep the site available for a new house. Locating the heavy industry zone on the border of our property will clearly decrease the property value, something the zoning ordinance states should not happen when zones are changed. And I would have to believe that all of these other homes that are in relative close proximity are going to be suffering some property decline if you have a heavy industry zone right out their back door. I just can't believe that your property value isn't going to decline whether you like it or not. To protect our property value, we hereby request a 1,000-foot setback around our property. We also request a conditional use so that if and when heavy industry ever does develop immediately west of our property, that the developer be required to install a 10-row typical shrub pine hardwood windbreak immediately west for the purpose of screening our property and helping protect our property value. And I'll hand these over to Mark so you can enter them in for you. Nobody has to take specific notes on all that. Again, thank you for your time and going through this whole process, serving on the board, and I appreciate the opportunity to have some input.
Thanks, Milt.
Yes, thank you, Milt.
I'm Doug Seaward. I live Highway 218 west or east of the proposed site. I guess I received a letter in the mail, and I guess I'm asking what, tonight I guess a decision is possibly going to be made on zoning. What do you want from me? Why did I get invited to this?
Everybody that lives within, typically we use a 500-foot radius, so any land that's being rezoned, we'll send a letter out to the homeowners. This time we went a little farther out just because it's such a big project. It's a notification for you guys. You know, you don't have to come to the meeting. It was just there to let you know that it was happening, and if you wanted to come and had an opinion one way or another, this was your chance to come and do it.
Okay. The ethanol plant was built on the north end of the section across from me. And like I mentioned earlier, I moved to Mitchell County to where I am because of the somewhat rural aspect, I guess, of living there. I have a steady drone in my yard. I'm out working on something. I'm not making noise. I really, it may sound like a complaint, but I don't know why else I'm here. Does that make sense? I mean, what does the board want from me? I mean, if this is going to happen, how am I really involved in the decision making? I'm not involved. I'm just here to complain. Well, I can't. That's not positive for me.
Well, the board
You're making your concerns known, and that's what the meeting is for.
Okay.
I also can see him asking what we are here for, what reason does what we think count? If we say no, all of us would say no unanimously to it, would this still go through?
The board has not made their mind up before they come into the meeting. They come in, they listen to everything that everybody has to say, and then they base their decision weighted on what they hear.
There was a comment made earlier about another industrial site they lost out because the proposed business was going to come in and then the people that owned the land jacked the price up. Well, even if you rezone this to commercial, what stops the people that say this is going to be zoned for commercial if they're asking $5,000 an acre? Say somebody wants to build a distribution plant there, they want all of a sudden want $10,000 an acre. That aspect doesn't change.
I don't think it changes. I mean, it's the property owners have a right to charge whatever they want for their property.
I mean, I think
refuse
Mitchell,
to sell.
Or refuse to sell.
I think Mitchell County, you know, part of the beauty of it is that it is quiet, or was. If somebody wants to build here, they should build because of what it has to offer, and not because of, I mean, if a company's just coming here because of incentive, you should have some kind of respect for what you have, I think. And they would want to build here because, I mean, I don't think having a zone set up, you know, you can advertise this, it's been going on since 2000, whatever. It must be out in the business market. I don't think you need to bend over for it. I mean, if they want to be here, because we have good schools, lots of conservation areas to do hunting, we can ride ATVs on the gravel roads now, we can, all those things, they should be enough to sell the county. I mean, the ethanol plant decided to build there, the zoning was changed in the process. I don't get what, you know.
For a dummy company, you could have people come in and buy the land up like they're gonna be agriculture still, have one person own it, not know it all, and turn around and ask for the rezoning. Then they own it already. Because there are dummy companies set up to buy out people's land for different prices, and then they own a conglomerate of land, and they bring it together without people's knowledge.
I think the majority of this land is owned by Dairyland.
No.
Which,
They said it
is
is,
that
I
right?
asked them.
No, that's not true. How much of it is owned by Dairyland?
I'm just ballparking, I'd say maybe a fifth of it.
So why do they need the 900 acres?
I think it's only 750 acres, isn't it, Stan?
No, I took it off soils. Well, you gave me like 8.
I mean, yeah, I thought it was about 800 acres when I did it, close to 800 acres, but that included roads and everything else.
I don't know,
I
I
just drew it around the outside of the line.
I used that one off the soil maps. It came up 901. I thought, well, that's quite a bit more than yours, but they shouldn't. The numbers never, they never come up exact. It's got to be somewhere between 800 and 900 acres.
Do you know, Stan, how many acres it is?
Okay. There was 6 people that sent letters, so I'm just guessing there was at least 6 people that own the land.
Yes.
And they were obviously solicited to send letters.
You know more about than I do.
And they, well,
I don't know
they're
where
the
that
ones that
is.
are stuck with these.
They didn't just sort of organically send letters saying, gee, we wish we could be rezoned heavy industrial.
That would make
That's
sense.
right.
That makes sense.
I mean, Brenda come in here and said that they were looking for areas of the county, and that was one of the areas that is most conducive for industries, and so, yes, I'm
Because
sure
the
they were
ethanol plant
solicited.
is already there, and so the people that live around the ethanol plant are already stuck with the ethanol
I
plant.
hate it.
I mean, so there really is reason for them to not care anymore, because it's already manipulated their property.
One of the people who signed a letter did so, Arlen's mother, somebody I've known all my life, did so for fear that if she didn't, she would not, her land would be taken, and she wouldn't get fair market value. Now, either this is leading someone down a wrong path, or there was some miscommunication about this. This concerns me gravely.
I will argue on that point, because I talked.
Stan, I have the floor right now. If this is how this was sold to people that signed this letter, it seems to me that there was some miscommunication in it, or it could have been misinterpretation of communication. But this is an issue.
I will take issue to that, because I was the one to contact.
You're not taking issue with me, you're taking issue with
No.
Arlen.
His mother.
Yeah.
I will, because we just explained, all we ever explained was that this was a potential area for industry, and you may be able to get more money at some point in time, and that's all we've ever explained. We never said anything about confiscating, whatever else. That was never, ever, ever brought up.
I'm sure.
And so I don't know where you come from, but that's a scare tactic to this board, and I don't like it.
Well,
No, I
I can
don't
speak
care
for
for
my
it.
dad, my
My
dad
mother
north of town,
signed it
that's basically
because
what happened.
she wanted to make sure she had a fair price if the land would be Or, yeah, commercial.
Well,
That's why she signed.
Just to chime in, I think, you know, we all realize, I think we can all realize, we have to have industrial areas. Our zoning is set up so that we can do that. And these folks get the pleasure of sitting there trying to figure all this out. And I think we all need to respect that. The process obviously has to start somewhere. I mean, somebody has to start that process. Like you say, landowners usually don't just get together and come in and ask for their land to be rezoned. So it's obvious. I mean, that's a step that has to take place. What I want to prevent is simply, and not even prevent it, I just want to make sure that we all consider it intelligently and have all the information you need to make good decisions on. To simply point at a spot on the map and say, two railroads come together, we got an interstate highway 14 miles away, hot damn, that's a great location. It's not. I mean, not based on that, it's not. I mean, it might be the greatest location we've got in Mitchell County. I don't know. And if that's you folks' choice based on good information, that's the way it'll be. But I guess I just don't want to get into the trap of saying we're going to select these sites based on what it's going to offer to the developer coming in. Because quite frankly, their goal is to make money. And they're going to make a ton of money, whoever it is. I don't care, they're not coming. So our job has to be to make sure that we're protecting our generation and the future generations that are going to be here, both for water and soil and natural resources, and God forbid any catastrophe or anything that's going to come along in terms of where we're positioning these plants at. So I guess I would just, that's my pitch, is just be cautious when we're looking at that. Don't just pinpoint a spot on the map and say, you know, this is it, this is the spot, because it's easy to do, I think.
I think the two rails have been there for over 100 years, haven't they?
3 rails.
Don't know about it.
It used to be three. It used to be three, yeah.
Where was the proposed coal plant? Same site. Same site?
No, it was further down.
Well, a little bit south of the ethanol.
Right by the cemetery.
That would have been on the Dairyland.
Right around the
cemetery.
Yeah,
The
right
Dairyland
there.
site was purchased for that?
It was sort of in this part of the,
I don't know if any potential heavy industry that's interested in moving in has received the preliminary subsurface characterization of the Otranto site, Mona, Iowa, that was done in June 2004, or if the rezoning committee has seen this document. It has some implications for rezoning, and I'd like to enter this on the record just under the section entitled Conclusions and Recommendations, and I can hand this over. It says the presence of shallow bedrock and the potential for solutional cavities in the bedrock would necessitate special consideration in the foundation design for structures and in permitting the stockpiles. An investigation related to groundwater protection and engineering measures related to potential soil and or rock collapse are warranted. If the site is recognized as displaying features consistent with karst conditions, the IDNR will place great scrutiny on the design and operations of the facilities. And now it's referring specifically to what Dairyland had proposed. Power plants rely on the availability of large quantities of high-quality groundwater. Existing data suggests that the Otranto site is underlain by a productive aquifer that should serve the needs of the proposed facility. This proposed fertilizer plant has demands far beyond that, but I realize we're not talking specifically about that. However, there is no site-specific data to confirm the local stratigraphy or hydrology of the underlying aquifers, so that means more studies necessary. There's also no data on the impact of large-scale withdrawal on the Cambro Ordovician Jordan aquifer on the overlying water supply. That basically means if you're drawing on the Jordan aquifer, which presumably they would be, there have not yet been studies to say whether it would affect my water level. Specific conclusions of this preliminary subsurface characterization relevant to power plant siting. Again, that was his 10-year-old study. The ground surface displays pre-karst type topography. Nearby springs suggest fracture flow in the shallow bedrock. Area water supply well logs indicate karst development. Bedrock collapse is not as likely as soil piping into bedrock fractures. Shallow aquifer contamination by surface operation has occurred in the past. Oh boy. Deep aquifer impacts from surface operations are not likely. And lastly, high volume withdrawals from the deep Cambro or Dorvitian Jordan aquifer can impact wells in that aquifer miles from the site, which is somewhat scary. So I will pass this over to you, Mark. I have another copy if you need more.
Alright. Well, on that point, I just might want to mention, even if this whole area was rezoned, there could be multiple companies come in and look at it and say, oh, we got soils that are not conducive to our business.
Right.
And nobody could ever come for that reason only. Or there could be a slew of businesses that come in and would say, our type of business doesn't matter if it's got that type of soil structure or not. So it's a lot of that is going to be left up to the businesses and the DNR and the EPA as to whether or not they get their approvals to do that.
So right now with the ethanol plant, where it's at, it's drawing from what I understand the same level as the city of Lyon.
I think so.
700 feet down.
Yep. Well, the 350 foot is what they're drawing their wells from, is what I remember.
So, they came and, pressurized, or checked the pressure drop on my well.
Yeah.
When they were pumping or whatever.
Drawdown test.
So then, at some point, they have to change levels of drawing water. So I mean, they can always go deeper and draw more water. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think the ethanol plant's enough for that area. I think it's enough. Honestly, I think that's enough industry in that area.
That's why we sent you a letter, so you can come.
Say that.
We're in that same position because we are not, our property is east of the railroad track. We're the apple orchard people.
Oh, okay.
I guess my main concern for you folks would be, and I think I've heard the term here, it's like a blank check. And it just, and how often do we tell our children that? Check everywhere. It just seems like it would just, that in and itself is somewhat frightening. And, and we would be neighbors to that as well. And, like once it's zoned, it's zoned. And without having that somewhat of a knowledge of what's coming in, I can understand that feeling of, I'm not too sure about it.
Not all my neighbors that are opposed to this could be here this evening, so they signed a petition, and I would like to, some of us are here that signed this, so I just wanted to pass that over.
This gets down to a little of which comes first, the chicken or the egg, zoning or the industry buying up the land and asking for zoning. At least you'd know what was coming then. Like you said, it is a blank check.
I mean, being, the hard part about it, we got this opportunity to speak about it, but we're not really involved in what happens there. Because you said, the landowners have signed paperwork to say, we're agreeable with what may happen. But we're not involved, and we're adjacent, or nearby, or it doesn't make sense. And most of the people around here, I think, have been there for the years. chosen to be there. So what,
You're concerned about your quality of life.
yes, to me, why, I mean, I can choose to move somewhere else, I guess, but I mean, we have invested part of my life there, and all these people have invested parts of their life there, because of what it is.
With the ethanol plant there, you can't sleep with the windows open in summertime anymore because of the noise.
Can hear the frogs.
But I grew up next to a railroad, they made less noise than they do.
It's short-term. Short-term noise, yeah, that's constant.
And smell.
Well, look at Hormel. That's a huge company. I know that's in Minnesota, but that place stinks for 10 miles in some days to wind.
I never smelled 12 years ago.
Ugh.
Yes.
I just would like to say a word about this whole concept of a blank check. So, you know, we know that we aren't talking about any specific company that is going to develop any specific thing here. But if it gets zoned, we aren't going to have another opportunity to talk about this. And so if it's zone heavy industrial, anything could happen. So we did a little bit of research on the company that is proposing to build a fertilizer plant, and it's called Cronus. It first made its website in March, February or March. So it's a brand new website. It's owned by someone from Switzerland and Turkey, and then there are 2 consultants. So there are not a lot of local people that, I mean, so you get the sense that this is probably a private equity group that has been put together by investors in Europe, and they're looking for a place off the beaten track where they can do whatever it is that they do. And as Milt has already said, I mean, my career has been in the world of business. Businesses are in business to make money. That's what they will be looking for. They'll be looking for the most economic benefits that the county and the state can provide, and they're going to be looking for the ways that they can take advantage of the whatever resources are there and that they need to maximize their profit. That's what they're going to be doing. And I don't envy you your jobs. I mean, I think it's a credit to you that you're willing to do this job. It's a hard job. And I believe in mixed economic development. But I think that if you don't know who you're getting into business with and you decide ahead of time that you're in business with them and they can sort of state the terms of play, I think it's a scary thing. It's a scary thing to us because they would be our neighbor. They might not be your neighbor, but they would be our neighbor. And we don't get to know who they are ahead of time, and we don't get to have any say about that. We don't get to kick the tires. We don't get to go to the headquarters. The headquarters, who knows where it is.
Well, they're registered in Delaware.
They're registered in Delaware, which is a great place to register a corporation if you don't want to have to disclose a lot. It's the best place in the United States to register a corporation if you don't want to have to do a lot of disclosure. So it's, I mean, I think it's alarming to people who would be the neighbors of one potential heavy industrial company that would come there. And part of the thing that I feel is that we're already residents of Mitchell County. We pay taxes here, we chose to live here, we've built homes here, we built lives here, and we did that because this is where we want to live. And it just somehow seems wrong that some phantom company that's registered in Delaware with investors in Switzerland and Turkey would be more important than the people who already make their lives here.
Amen.
Okay, thank you.
And I just wanted to add, I'm Deb Freeman, and we live on section 22. And my family homesteaded there in 1854. So we've been there 160 years this year. And so for this to come in now, I mean, even the ethanol plant, you know, we see that constant steam. You know, that's what we see out our north windows now. And so while we don't hear the noise because we aren't quite as close, but it's just a shame. you know, what's going on. And we have creeks and a lot of waterways through there. And so my biggest concern is the water and air pollution and noise pollution, light pollution, I mean, all the things that come with all this industry. You know, grain millers, we can see their lights. We're 9 miles north, and we can see their lights. So it's not just, you know, one, it's just a lot of industry in Mitchell County that's not really being managed in terms of environmental concerns, and that's a worry. And, you know, we do have the mountains north of us and the creeks and where the Indians had, you know, their sites and all of that, so we do know that's all there. So just one more thing to think about.
If a large corporation was to build in heavy industrial and say things weren't going as planned or things were getting polluted or whatever, would Mitchell County have the resources to have things straightened up, or would we just be corporate lawyered out because there's not enough clout or enough that we could do to straighten things out if it did go sour?
It's an impossible question to answer.
That's more up to the state DNR, I would think. That's not a county by county thing. That would be a state.
So it'd be a huge oil spill or a huge gasoline spill in Mitchell County, that would be the state cleaning it up? Or a huge fertilizer plant, all of a sudden just their walls caved in around the thing and everything went fine?
It would be for them to administer, I'm sure, the DNR, but they're not easy to deal with, so.
There'd be more EPA than...
One thing that I forgot, and I wanted to be sure and get it in, Kurt and I were able to attend a meeting in, I can't remember where we went that day, south central Iowa. The Iowa Geological Survey has found 2 spots in the state of Iowa where we have positioned heavy industry that are utilizing large sources of groundwater. One is at Fort Dodge, and the other one is in eastern Iowa. I can't even remember exactly, I think it's around the Iowa City area, possibly. But they are finding these businesses, industries that require large amounts of water, be it whatever they are, they're all pumping from the Jordan Aquifer, because that's the aquifer that's going to give you that quantity of water. And they have 2 locations where they are documenting that aquifer is I suspect it's, and I don't understand all the technology of it, but I just want to get on the record that our groundwater is not an unlimited resource, and we have found 2 places in the state of Iowa where they are documenting it is what they call the pressure on it, and Doug talked a little bit about that, but they're getting a cone effect around those areas where they're drawing so much on a daily basis that it doesn't have time to recharge itself in those areas. So when we position those kinds of industries in close proximity to each other, it seems to have more of an impact on those immediate areas. Certainly what impact it's going to have in the whole region, I don't know, but I wanted to get that in because it is a little bit frightening in terms of it's not an unlimited resource that we have. So
I guess you could say the same about irrigation too. I mean, if
well,
there's farmers around here started to want to irrigate.
It's a little like Nebraska, but a little different. They're sitting on a lake that's not quite as, but they're suffering some serious water depletion out there.
There was talk about you know, families that have lived in this area for 160 years, and I just would like to make the point that there's many families that may not have stayed in this area for 160 years if there was not economic growth, if there was not places for them to work. I mean, it's a give and take. We got to find that balance, and that's why the boards and communities are based there.
I would also like to make a water-related comment, and this is based on the experience that our friends at the fertilizer plant in Keokuk had. As you know, the state enticed a group to develop a fertilizer plant, and this site may not be a fertilizer plant. I get that, but I think that when you see in the newspapers that a fertilizer plant is interested in coming to Mitchell County, and you have one site, then it doesn't take Nostradamus to figure out where it is. Okay, So, the thing that our people in Keokuk discovered, I'm reading from a Keokuk newspaper, residents got a big surprise, this was dated December 9th, when they learned the Iowa Fertilizer Company here in Weaver applied to the Iowa Department of Natural Resources to up its water usage in a legal notice published Thursday. The fertilizer company asked the Iowa Department of Natural Resources to approve a permit raising the water usage from 480 million gallons annually to 3.3 billion yearly gallons. 3.3 billion with a B. Now, in my conversations with the state hydrologist, Bob Libra, he said the preliminary estimates based on what Illinois has offered the same fertilizer plant. As you know, we're sort of in a bidding war for them. Who can give them the most? And the who can give them, in part, involves people sitting up here. Who can give them the most? He said, it looks to me like the proposed Cronus plant, a lot of details aren't yet revealed, would require twice as much water as the plant in Keokuk. That's a frightening thing when you consider that right now this is between 2 and 3 times the water demand for the city of Mason City. That's just a lot of water.
And it's right next to an ethanol plant.
And it's right next to an ethanol plant.
It's already gone.
So then where does that water stream? Is that
What does the ethanol plant use? Does anybody know?
Volume wise, I used to know what it was. I mean, it's a big number.
It's a lot.
It's,
There's a lot of water from down there creek now.
yeah,
And it never freezes over. It's warm.
the only good thing about an ethanol plant as far as its water release is it's
Clean.
non-toxic.
Yeah, it's clean.
That's about the only thing I can really say good about it. But they draw a lot of water. That's why we required those drawdown tests before they were allowed to do that. Maybe if we want to hit questions of anybody who hasn't had a chance to make any comments or anything.
Just a comment. We've only owned the property out there for 6 years, and part of the reason for purchasing the property there was, well, actually 2 reasons. It's very difficult in Mitchell County to locate small tracts of land. So we were able to purchase roughly a 40-acre tract. It's actually in Mona, just to the east. We're in section 14. And we know that the groundwater is shallow there. And we had a well put in last year. We're down not quite 200 feet. We're capable of drawing 300 gallons per minute out of that well. And it has a static level of 12 feet below the ground surface once everything's settled. The property in question has tremendous assets outside of the curve on Highway 218, which, if anything went in out there that brought high numbers of employment, I would ask, to be addressed. But further than that, I think to comment on what Milt has said, I think that when we're looking at heavy industrial, that we do need to do some more research. We do need to set up some guidelines as to what a piece of property is, the uses for it, and not have such a general, for lack of a better term, blank check that a piece of land can be used on. So, as much as I would like to see the economic development and the jobs and more students in our schools, I just think there's more work that needs to be done.
And I don't think, excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I don't think any of us here would say we don't want any development. Because we know if we don't grow and if we don't have development, that our town and where we live and everything that we enjoy here will eventually die. And I don't think that that's what we're saying, and or you folks are saying. It's just, we just need to be careful. I just can't reiterate that enough. We just have to have those unanswered questions that you brought forth, Milt, and that you have brought forth. we have to have those questions answered before we make this kind of decision.
Anybody else wanna get in there? Before they move into the closed session here pretty soon.
No further comment? I see a hand, yes.
I'm glad we had this meeting and that, but, you know, after you've made your decision or moved on, I hope there's more meetings that involve us so we know what's going on, because for this meeting to start, there had to been these, like was said, these farmers just didn't walk in and say, hey, we'll zone our land. Somebody had to go out and talk to them and say, we have somebody in interest, would you consider this? So we're kind of in the dark in a little bit on the fact that you guys already know that there's interest in something going on, and we're being told that we'd like to zone this industrial, but we're not being told who, what, why. Yeah, that kind of goes back to that phrase, the blank check again. So I think there needs to be more meetings set up before this goes, to keep us in the loop of what's going on, so we know what's happening and not just something all of a sudden, cement trucks coming in and dozers and stuff getting put in.
If there's no further comment, we'll close the public hearing. And have our discussion.
Do you have anything you'd like to discuss up here? I mean, basically.
Well, and the sad thing is that the public doesn't know, we're just a sounding board.
Right.
Supervisors, if we say no, they can say yes, you know. So our recommendation goes to them that way. In my opinion, I'm never gonna vote to do heavy industrial without knowing what's coming. We've always said that. So that isn't even a concern. I mean, the letter is to try to do heavy. I'm not gonna ever vote heavy because we don't know. We could have a coal plant.
Well, those aren't being built anymore.
Right.
And luckily it was prevented
Yeah.
at the time.
So the simple fact is there something coming? We don't know, but we all know that if it's gonna get done, it'll get done anyway.
I think Brenda's point was that she was trying to say there's so many companies out there right now that are potentially looking at places like us, but they need to know that, yeah, you've already got a place designated zoned over as heavy industrial. So that hurdle's already been gone past. They've already done the other transportation and water and everything else that she talked about. And so when that company does come here, or look at this area, they said, well, look, this place has already got A, B, and C, and D lined up for us. We should put heavy consideration into going to Mitchell County. If we don't ever give them these kind of areas, then they may not. So therein lies the balance of what do we do.
We've always kept that heavy is we can't really come back, right? Once we're heavy.
Well, I can appreciate the shovel-ready thing, and that's great. Is there any way we can put restrictions on that to have a, you know, find out what it is before you can give the permit, or, I mean, is there anything we can do in that respect? To make it shovel-ready, but still have some control over it?
I wish I could say yes, but I don't know how.
Well, if it's zoned that, I mean, and then have some say-so as to what it is. I'm just asking, I don't know if there's, I mean, is it one way or the other?
It's one way or the other, except for the supervisor still have the final say on whatever it is.
Right, so we can put a restriction, they can say no, and restrictions, or just say, or add, yeah, it's not always a negative.
I mean, I can appreciate the part where, I mean, the company could want to know, I mean,
Sure.
and, you know, just with,
And companies should
and
appreciate it.
have the time, you know, save the time, but I agree that the person should be able to know before you just make that decision.
They should be doing studies on what the ground is before they even make plans.
I'm not as concerned about the, I mean, I'm concerned about the water, everybody's concerned about water, but I really think that anything that comes in, they're gonna have tests. I mean, they're gonna have really stringent requirements on how much water somebody can draw on. I would think, I would hope the states would take care of that type of
I
thing.
think it's one of those, if they don't have water, they're not gonna build.
But I am concerned that just anything, I mean,
Right.
that does, I mean,
Or if a company comes in that their type of business is not gonna be conducive with the karst soil or whatever, then they're not gonna consider it. It'd be too expensive for him to put in.
And you can say that about
or whatever.
any place in Mitchell County, because it's all limestone.
It is.
Yeah, I don't care where, we'll say, we're sitting on the best soil in the state of Iowa, and that's just where the town is built. You know, we could argue that a million times, but.
I have a question. Once we are rezoned,
It's closed. Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
it's
sorry,
closed?
yeah,
Oh.
yeah, we're gonna stay closed once it's closed.
So, I'm definitely not in favor of just saying heavy industrial. I don't want to get from standpoint what's common, what's not. You know, if the fertilizer plant was here and they said, hey, this is what we're gonna do, these criteria, that everything matches, we can look at it. The shovel-ready thing I appreciate too, but at the same time, it's like, you know, on the positive side, you know, like the casino, for example, Worth County, I mean, Mason City turned it down, they would take it today. You know, so I mean, not everything that always comes as negative. I mean, you know, a fertilizer plant, maybe, I don't know. I mean, anything can happen, but. So it's our job here tonight, we're supposed to make a motion, we're supposed to move a motion, we're supposed to don't it, or we table it, or what's our job?
You just explained everything that we can do. We can. Those are our options: approve, deny, or table.
So Mark, obviously.
There's no option for anything like, this is my term, state would use it, like light industrial. Is there any other, does it go from agriculture to heavy industrial? Is there anything in the middle?
No, I mean, it jumps right down to light industrial.
Yeah.
Light industrial is probably going to whack out very restrictive. Yeah, very restrictive to bigger industry types.
You know, that's the other thing we gotta discuss, is that something that the Mitchell County needs? You know, if we just throw out the fertilizer plant, is that something that Mitchell County needs? Is that something that's gonna make our schools better, more jobs? You know, and that's their type.
Tax base.
Yeah, tax base.
What are they talking? Dollars.
pardon?
The dollars, is it 1.4 billion?
Yes, yes.
That's what I read in the Des Moines paper.
Yes.
All I really know is what I've read in the Des Moines paper. That they're playing this off between Iowa and Mitchell County. And I said to myself, well, where in Mitchell County? There's one place. This is it.
That's right.
And the next thing I heard is when I got this in the mail.
And I try to see it that way, I try not to know coming in, I try to be dumb to it from the standpoint that I don't wanna have an opinion before I get here.
Right.
You know, and the other thing is so, if they were building in Roger's backyard or Gary's backyard, or, you know, what would we think at the same time? But, so that's a tough call. I mean, if it was a fertilizer plant, we were talking here, and this is the things it was gonna do, and this is what it was gonna do back to the community, that's a different conversation than here. But, like I said, we could say no.
The Valent plant on the edge of Osage was built without our input.
Yeah.
It was a done deal before anybody asked us.
That's right.
So we can say no to the zoning. And it could be done that way.
And you don't know that this isn't the case with fertilizer plants.
No, I don't, but I'm very suspicious. You know, everybody's got,
And that still will always have a bad taste to me that we never even heard about it because it was a hush-hush deal. Well, give us a little credit that we're going to be a hush-hush committee. You know, instead of building the Valiant plant and then after it's, hey, we already got it done.
Yeah.
You guys pass it. Thank you very much. You know, I mean, but so maybe this is the same type of deal where it's no matter what they do, we don't know.
In that particular case, that company would have never came here
If
if we would have known about it.
But people did know, Mark.
I mean,
and who are the chosen few? I mean, you were chosen, so, I mean. why are we a committee if we weren't the chosen few, you know? And I understand.
That's a valid point.
I mean, it's, okay, so you are here, you're gonna be chosen in ways, you know, we get to, you know, you heard about it for 2 years before it ever came.
Yeah, they were out there surveying, there's a electrical line, a substation
Substation
being
getting
built,
built.
and they're
That's
surveying.
boring.
What is it?
Bids
What's
are
coming?
probably out for
We
good
didn't
work.
know.
So, like I say, I don't know, we could be on the backside of this already. Is there anything we can do? Not really. We can say no, or we can say go, and it's politics in Mitchell County or state of Iowa, I don't care how you look at it, it doesn't matter where it's at, but will it be a positive, you know? Will it come and now our little elevator we run, I mean, I'm not telling you accidents can't happen, but there are regulations after regulations after regulations that we have to go through. You know, just to pull an hydrous tank down the road, it's like, you know, you're to the point where a lot of these companies are like, we're not even messing with it now. So a fertilizer plant will be scrutinized to the tilt. And I'm not going to tell you there isn't going to be a spill. I mean, every hog building is the same situation, but.
You need a motion?
One way or the other.
So our motion is either to zone it heavy or not to zone it at all.
Motion is to either approve the request or deny the request, or table the matter for lack of enough information.
Which then what's that do to us?
Doesn't do nothing, it just kills it's the same as saying no.
But then it still can go to the supervisors?
No.
No. So we table it, it's tabled. But they can bring it back off the table
That's
in
they
later
can-
meeting.
We can bring it back and do another one of these meetings and we redo the whole process.
As long as the request form went through, we could.
Actually, even if you say no, they can still
Right,
bring it
back.
Yeah, so tabling is just same as saying no.
Outside of the fact that if we table it due to the fact we don't know what plan's coming or what company is interested, that gives us, because we don't have the information.
But on the other hand, if it's somebody and we make our total decision on that plant, we don't want them or we do them whatever, and then maybe they pull out after we've got the zoning done.
Then we lost them.
Yeah.
Once they bring one
But
point
property
forward.
zone.
Right. It's already zoned.
It's zoned, yeah.
So I don't know whether we should be really zoning the land on one idea of what it could be or not.
Right.
You know.
Because once you zone it,
Yeah,
it's difficult to bring it back.
It's there, yeah.
Because you can always zone it light and then move it to heavy if need be.
The only other thing to think about is even though the owners, I mean, say it got rezoned to heavy industrial, if one of the property owners up there had somebody come in and say, oh, okay, we're ABC company and we want to buy your land and put our company in here, they can still say no.
Right.
They still have that right.
All for a price is basically what it is.
Yeah, or if they just don't like the idea of what the place is, I mean, say they do something that's just.
But the company could purchase it before they tell them what it is, correct? I mean, I could go in there and buy the ground, offer them 50 grand an acre and tell them I'm just gonna hunt deer.
Yeah. If you want to be sneaky.
Well, you know, you look at the value, that sold for 10 grand, a year later it would've sold for 20 for farm ground. You know, I mean, you can look at that in two different ways. I mean, it's a fluctuation of the commodities, but.
They can't use eminent domain, can they?
No.
That's for public good.
Yeah, that's eminent domain, that's nothing to do with us, it's, I guess, pretty much a thing of the past, you know, like, it's railroad days.
Well, they're fighting it for a lake down at Osceola for a water. We're talking about eminent domain to take it for the public good. So it is still.
Some old school coming back. I don't know, I mean, it's a tough call, so, you know, if it was your backyard and they zoned it heavy industrial, what's your thoughts? You're moving, you're staying?
Because I have one just like that in my
Backyard.
backyard.
That's right.
I moved.
Yeah, you moved and I'm still there.
The other thought would be is if you own some of this land up there and you're thinking, you know,
Get
this
rich
is a
quick.
really good place for a heavy industrial and I just might make myself some good money at it. But then you find out that, no, I got turned down because my neighbors liked it. Can't make any money because my neighbors won't let me.
So
That's just a thought.
quick question, Mark, and maybe I should have done more research, but of the 6 people at Senate, how many people live there?
4 of them?
4 out of the 6?
I think.
You know, like this one put in there, it is also my understanding this will not affect my property taxes.
Which it won't. The property taxes are based
Based
on
on
use.
right.
Yeah, so
I just thought that was kind of ironic that they would put that in there. But
they just wanted to make sure that suddenly they weren't going to get a huge tax next year.
now their capital gains when they're selling their land might hurt a little bit.
That just money.
I can't imagine that they need, well, they keep, everybody thinks the fertilizer plant, where Brenda says, you know, it could be multiple things. But the fertilizer plant cannot take all that ground.
The fertilizer plant would take a
Okay.
chunk just for siding of the rail. You're talking probably 100 acres just for siding of rail for the fertilizer transport. That's probably where they're coming. How much will the plant, in my opinion, take? The ones we toured? Very little, but the siding of the rail, you think of that will take a chunk of ground to
Well,
move
look
the
at
rail.
west of the ethanol plant, I mean, yeah.
Right, they got 100 cars. The fertilizer plant, 100 cars is a bad day. You know, I mean, you're moving probably 500 cars a day. If not, you're not in business. You know, so your siding is huge for that situation. You know, you look at the ethanol plant, when it came, everybody said I was gonna do 150 trucks a day. And people thought, no way. Sit down in Floyd and count. You know, I mean, that's a lot of traffic that we weren't aware of. So it changes things. You know, most of that would be rail.
Rail wouldn't be the worst thing, traffic wouldn't be the best thing.
Right,
That's
right. Rail's fine. You know, the traffic is the issue with the thing.
I'm all for the economic development part, but, you know, we're not real educated on what restrictions we could even make.
Yeah, well, without a company to put certain restrictions on there, that's what I'm saying, I don't know what kind of restrictions we can put.
Setbacks, but
Yeah.
the water thing, we can't restrict that, that's up to the DNR permitting.
To your knowledge, there's not been any studies on anything?
No, honestly, I haven't heard it. Blind as you guys.
From what I've been hearing, it's not gonna happen because of the gas situation, but I don't know if I'm hearing the right thing.
There could be a whole bunch of other companies that
I mean, yeah,
we have no idea about it. It could
personally
be a
don't think it's
multitude.
fertilizer, but I don't know what it is or if it's anything.
If there's no gas, there's no fertilizer.
No, I don't, that's what
You
I
know,
mean.
Yeah, so
Right,
There's
that's
no
a
gas.
Yeah, if there's no gas, it's something else. Well, then that scares you a little bit too, you know, so then what's company B if it's not company A?
Well, I don't think, to be honest, I don't think there is a company.
So we're just.
No, I think it's
hopeful.
more of the,
Trying to
I'd
get
like to
some
believe it's more of the
shovel-ready, yeah.
trying to be shovel ready, I mean,
I think so.
but I'm not sure that's,
So does the risk outweigh the reward on shovel ready? So
Right.
we're shovel ready, we get a company, but the risk is too high. That's the only question we have.
That's some of it, yeah.
Well, then what about the archaeological concerns? That might throw the whole thing out.
It could throw a wrench in the whole program. I mean, even if everything got passed and some company come in and the first thing they did is unearth a huge archaeological
Look at Highway 9 in
site.
Plymouth.
What in that, yeah.
Plymouth
just-
corners. You know, they were gonna make that road straight, and boom, shut down. Got a little ditch in the road.
And I always thought the burden, the money, when you hit an archaeological site, you either go completely around, but all the money is bore on the company. I mean, whoever wants to do whatever there has to spend all the money for the archaeological research and everything.
well, that's probably a restriction we could make. it's an environmental study by anybody that potentially was gonna use that land, couldn't you?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, that.
Wasn't the
everything.
environmental study one of the factors that Brenda was mentioning that had to be done? Right along with all the other stuff.
I don't know enough about it to know if it has to be done. I've been involved in enough projects.
She was saying
If there's ever any
Didn't she
state
include
monies
that?
involved, they're gonna have a study. I mean,
I think
there
she
probably
was-
would be a study.
She was saying that
But I don't know if
if
it
you
has to
want
be.
a shovel-ready project, you want to have all, everything lined up. Now, here's the water, here's the transportation, here's the archaeological study, we've really done that, Everything is ready for you guys to go here, why would you want to go anywhere else, That's the sales pitch they're trying to do. And if they don't have a sales pitch like that, then next county over, who does have some heavy industrial land line, with all those little studies done.
So your impression would be if we zoned this heavy industrial, that they do an archaeological study right away?
That's, no, I'm saying that whatever company comes in, if they hit anything archaeological, then they have to deal with it. That's how I.
Well, usually, any time that I've been involved stuff with state monies, like I say, they'll do that study before that project starts.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I don't.
Or if you hit, you're digging and you hit, you gotta stop right there and
right,
call
right,
them in.
Right,
And they determine from there on what you can do,
right.
or do their studies and. I just wonder if what we do here tonight is really gonna affect the decision of that fertilizer plant or not. They're gonna go one place or the other.
That's just my gut feeling, but I don't know for sure. I just been hearing about the gas thing, and it's not even, that's not even a possibility at this time. But
Isn't the county doing a study on gas? Can I ask Stan?
Yes.
And I see, what, 100 or 150,000 study,
70,000.
70? And that's another requirement.
So we got 4 people. The chair votes to pass or to tie. So it's between us 3. I'm a no, and you're a no, you're a yes. That's the way that goes. No matter what motion we make, it's still going to be up to Gary to pass or fail it. So we'll just put it on his shoulder.
Don't you love that, Gary?
Yeah.
We'll either pass it or we table. The only thing I like about tabling is that we can bring it back, because realistically you can't bring the same exact motion back in parliamentary procedure. It can be different a little.
well, I'm not, you said I'm a yes, I'm not in favor of it without restrictions, and I'm not sure I'm all read enough to know what restrictions we want or can do.
Well, I think Mark said it at the beginning, we really can't put restrictions on it.
Well, we could do setbacks and different restrictions,
Yeah,
I think, but what?
Yeah.
I mean,
And will those hold up? If we
because
do?
like you, I knew nothing about this with these letters before I got here, so.
It's hard to put restrictions on something you don't know what it is, other than setbacks. Whatever it is, it has to stay at least this far back, that's the only thing.
So tabling gives us time to give county more time to say, okay, this is where we want to be now. And granted, if it's truly they want it just shovel ready and there's no company coming, that's a different thing than if we're shovel ready for a fertilizer plant. To me, those are 2 different issues. Because you hate to kill economics and growth. They're not going to survive without it. That's no brainer unless we get $10 corn, then everybody will complain. So.
Well, we're lucky now because there has been a lot happening in our area as far as, and maybe it's not been all good. But at least our schools aren't declining as
Right,
much.
we're surviving.
So we're surviving.
If we
And
ever get
part of that is because what's going on.
Yeah, if we ever get over the old Wildcats and Green Devils and make it, we'll be a lot better off. But we got old people that are, they got that.
I'll be
drive.
careful.
I've seen school systems thrive being joined and going forward, and it's never the kids that have the issue, it's the parents that have the issue. So yeah, we are fortunate. I mean, Osage is a good town, St. Ansgar is a good town, Riceville, even little towns, Mona, Meyer, I mean, Orchard, we do have a beautiful place, so we want to keep that integrity, and that's part of our job. You know, I come on the agricultural side and say, okay, there's 700 acres that goes out of production. We're still struggling feeding the world. We're not going to get it back. But at the same time, that fertilizer plant will generate more income and tax dollars than corn would ever do in a million years.
I still wouldn't like to base our whole decision on any one plant or one business.
Right. It could be Willy Wonka
Because
chocolate factory.
We may, hey, that's
Be awesome. So you're same as Roger, which are same as me, so we either move the tail or we move the table. I like tabling. All my years of parley, I love tabling because you can bring it back, you can redo it, you can add to it, you can amend to it. You kill the motion, that kind of kills it from the standpoint we feel we want an industry, which that's not.
No.
And you table it due to the fact that we don't have enough knowledge.
Then we need, if we're going to do that, then we need to have some means of gaining that knowledge.
Right. Company B comes to us and says we're interested, there's our knowledge. I think it's pretty loaded to say, I hate the blank check thing because I would love a blank check.
No, maybe to give us a chance to learn a little more about the shovel-ready part of it too, and what we can do.
Because this is step one, is the county gonna do the water? You know, are they gonna put the money forward to make it shovel-ready? You know, what's that gonna cost? So we do the planning, so it's zoned. You gotta do the water study, this study. I mean, what's that gonna cost the county to not get it?
They're doing a study on gas, apparently.
So that tells us they're pretty aggressive.
Could be for a multitude of different things.
Right.
I mean, maybe
Riceville
just
has no
there,
gas.
right.
I know.
But Milt mentioned, other, like Polk County or whatever, that maybe has a little more zoning rules or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, is that something that can be put in place so that nobody has to study it until the project is named and they come in? And those studies have to be done before it's approved. I mean, is that something that is impossible?
I can't say yes or no on that.
We'd have to put it in our, right, we'd have to have it in our plan.
Yeah, we'd have to get it approved and added to.
We can't put it as a stipulation on this zoning on that property. That the studies have to be made.
We'd have to
Or
make-
the water studies have, I'm just asking, you can't restrict that property to that.
And I think we could put it in as conditions.
So we'd have to make a motion and add amendments to the motion to pass it.
Yeah, I'm just don't know if it's going to affect their shovel-ready project. They can't be shovel-ready if we've got
Too many
all
restrictions
these
on it.
conditions,
Conditions.
So then if we're gonna put all these conditions, then we just might as well not pass it. Because if that's our goal is shovel-ready, and that doesn't make it shovel-ready, then we didn't do anything.
But that's something we can research.
Right. So
But
we
some of
table
these
it.
issues about the water and all this, any company coming any place is going to have water issues, one way or another. It wouldn't be identical.
And they're not gonna build
Similar,
this that long.
but this all comes around to the plan, the fact that we're planning and zoning, and we always are working on zoning issues, and we don't ever do anything.
We don't do the planning.
And so this is where a case where we probably should. We should be looking at the ordinances and get it in there. Instead of waiting till afterwards and boom, we don't have it in there, and we probably should.
I'm not assuming that falls into the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, but we should have it in there, in the comprehensive plan. Should we not?
But really, the point of the planning and zoning is just for a public hearing, right? I mean, that's kind of the thing.
That's what we do. Mm-hmm.
and then it goes board of adjustments,
Board of
supervisors, and
Adjustments, yeah.
all of them can,
Yeah.
just to start the rolling. But yeah, we never know the plan. Of course, this is our plan. It's kind of
Our
part of the
land,
plan.
yeah. We do our land use plans and comprehensive plans. I mean, that's the planning part of the planning and zoning.
But you should be updating them, just as organizations should be updating their constitution and bylaws, the same thing. We should be at least looking at them and saying, do we need to update them?
So if we had our heavy industrial had a bunch of restrictions, you know, saying that if a company wants to come in, it has to have at least a water study done first, or it has to.
Environmental.
An environmental study or an archaeological study. If our heavy industrial ordinance had that all in, then you may be swayed to say yes on it, whereas now it doesn't, and you're swayed to say no.
I'd like to get Brenda's opinion of would that hamper future development if you did that?
Any more restrictions on it? I mean, we're kind of looking at it negatively, and it could be a plant that has very little negative to it.
That's true.
You know, I mean, we're thinking fertilizer, which everything's throwing our way, that's saying, okay, that's one that we've looked at. Like I said, it could be something that needs rail, that's not a negative, a positive for everybody. To an extent.
Yeah, a widget factory.
Yeah. It uses no water, and doesn't need gas, just needs some electricity, and here we go.
No noise.
Workers.
Needs workers. Like in the 6 Mile School.
Send in
Our plan. So I think that's where I lean, that we need more information. I really think we don't have enough. Whether we table it to say that we need more information down the road, and then we can come back 30 days, 60 days, or whenever it's called.
Motion to table.
I motion to table.
I'll second the motion.
We're gonna do a roll count. Roger, on motion to table.
Aye.
Frank.
Aye.
Dora.
Aye.
Gary.
Aye.
So it's not approved. It's basically tabled. We could not make a decision. That's where we're at. Okay? All we got. Thank you very much.